Today I'll be talking about analysis of type 1a supernova light curves. So before discussing about the light curves, let's talk about the supernovae themselves, type 1a supernovae. What are these? These are thermonuclear explosions of carbon-oxygen containing white dwarfs. White dwarfs are end stages of our sun-like star. Their mass is comparable to that of sun, but their volume is like that of Earth. So they are very, very high density objects. And once these stars run out of nuclear fusion, the internal gravity starts compressing the star. Then the star is only supported by the electron degeneracy pressure. But once the mass of this star exceeds that of Chandrasekhar limit, that is 1.44 solar masses, if it is in a binary by merger or transfer from the companion star, then this white dwarf goes into explosion, that is type 1a supernovae. In our galaxy, the occurrence of supernovae is very rare. If we are lucky, we can see it in Betelgeuse some maybe in future, but these supernovae are observed mostly in the other galaxies. So type 1a supernovae are the brightest of all supernovae, which include type 1b and type 1c, and their brightness is so much that for months they can outshine the brightness of the host galaxy itself. And supernovae explosions release all the material of the star into the rest of the galaxy. This picture shows the 1994D supernovae, which can be seen below the host galaxy. Now coming to that of light curve. The brightness of a supernova isn't continuous, it changes over time. First it increases and then it starts dimming. This picture shows the brightness of 1997 CJ supernova, and the plot of this change in brightness or magnitude of the supernova over the time is called light curve, and the corresponding plot shows the light curve of the same supernova in two different wavelength filters, and we can see that the change, how this change occurs in the supernova. In the initial period there is a change of like 3 magnitudes in 15 days, and then it reaches a maximum. After that it started declining with a rate of almost 0.11 magnitude per day. The ejecta which the supernova explosion throws into galaxy is very rich with heavy elements like that nickel, and the luminosity of the supernova that is observed is basically due to powered by radioactive decay of nickel into cobalt and iron. And if there was absence of this radioactive decay, then due to adiabatic expansion during explosion, that would have cooled down the debris to invisibility within a very short time, and we wouldn't have observed such a high luminosity. And it is observed that all type 1a supernovae have very similar light curves, so they can be due to having same luminosity, they can be used for distance estimation because of the luminosity distance relationship. So these are called standard candles. But it has also been observed in studies that all the light curves of these supernovae aren't very much similar. There are some differences. It is seen that the supernovae having more metallic components are dimmer than their counterparts having less metallic components. Also, the light curves in different wavelength filters appears almost similar, but once we go to the higher wavelengths like red or infrared, then there is some change in the light curve. From different light curves of type 1a supernovae, it has been found that there is a relationship between the luminosity and width of the curve. It has been observed that the absolute magnitude is related to the width of the light curve. The broader our light curve, the brighter the brighter our supernova is. This relationship was found out by Phillips in 1993. Uh, it is a linear relationship between the linear decline parameter of the light curve and the absolute magnitude. This linear decline parameter is basically the difference in the brightness of a supernova of its peak and the brightness after 15 days. Here we can see different parameters of light curve of type 1a supernova. These are the same delta M15 linear decline parameter and T plus half and T minus half. What are these? The T minus half is the time taken by supernova to increase its luminosity from half of its peak value to that of its highest peak value. And T plus half is the time taken by supernova in for decrease in its brightness of highest, that is peak, to its half. And the same linear decline parameter is the change in brightness of peak and that brightness after 15 days. Now, having discussed various parameters of light curves, let's see what determines those parameters or what actually determines the shape of our light curve. The shape is actually decided by competition between three factors. These are energy from radioactive decay, which is that of gamma rays of capture processes of nickel and cobalt, and the kinetic energy of positrons, which result from decay of cobalt, and also annihilation of gamma rays. And the second factor is the conversion of internal energy into kinetic energy of expansion during adiabatic expansion during explosion, and also some of the energy escape as radiation, which we observe in the light curve. So let's discuss the different phases of luminosity of the supernova light curve and the physics behind this. So when the supernova explosion happens, the ejecta form a completely opaque expanding sphere, and there is also radioactive decay happening of nickel and cobalt. The half-life for the nickel decay is 6 days and that for cobalt is almost 77 days. The deposition of radioactive decay energy takes place mainly by gamma rays, the conversion of into internal energy by Compton spectrum of electrons, and by positrons, but not by neutrinos, because neutrinos completely escape the ejecta. And so during the early stages of the light curve, when the luminosity is very low, what happens is there is very high opacity of the ejecta, and so the internal energy is being converted into the kinetic energy during expansion, and due to high opacity, the diffusion of any photon through the ejecta is not very much favorable. The diffusion can be actually seen as the scattering of photons by the optically thick ejecta. But because of the very high opacity of ejecta, very less photons pass through that, so there is very small luminosity. Then comes the phase, the pre-maximum epoch, when the luminosity is increasing but not as much as that of peak. So what happens during this phase is the ejecta has become dilute due to expansion and the photons are able to escape through it. Hence there is an increase in luminosity. Then comes the peak phase when the brightness is at its highest. This happens because some of the old photons which haven't been able to pass the ejecta or diffuse through it are finally able to diffuse, and also there is the radioactive decay because of is declining, but the energy produced by RDE, radioactive deposition energy, matches it. Hence the luminosity is at its peak. Then after the peak it starts declining. The main reason behind this is that most of the nickel has already been decayed and the luminosity had matched the instantaneous deposition rate, and it is not being compensated by further radioactive decay. So then the luminosity starts decreasing and the tail of the light curve is only powered by radioactive beta decay of cobalt. The peak luminosity of the light curve is determined by amount of nickel, because more the nickel is synthesized, the higher the temperature is and more the ionization take place, and then the cooling during adiabatic expansion isn't much effective, therefore leading to a brighter supernova. And the width of the light curve is also determined by gamma ray escape fraction, because the more the gamma ray escaping tendency, the narrower will be the curve. And because when the yield of nickel is higher, higher is the temperature, that means nickel has high velocity and also gamma ray escape fraction is more. Then this gamma ray escape fraction opposes the broadening tendency of the high yield of nickel. So these opposes each other. So these two factors aren't independent. Both the yield of nickel and the gamma ray escape tendency determine the peak luminosity and the width of the light curve. Along with that, it has been seen that the opacity of the ejecta also play a major role in the determining the peak luminosity of the light curve. Therefore, when we analyze the light curve due to these factors affecting its luminosity, we can determine the yield of nickel and the gamma ray escape tendency from the light curve. How these light curves are obtained? These are obtained from the observations. Due to galactic dust or any other factor, the data is slightly, the brightness is slightly dimmed, or what we call is reddened. So to counter that, we take into consideration the extinction factor and we de-redden our data. Then we calculate the distance of source of this radiation to calculate the luminosity. Then we, using various fitting algorithm, we fit our data towards standard set of templates, and then we estimate the errors in our data by various techniques like Monte Carlo method. And to obtain a volumetric light curve, we integrate the observation in different wavelengths, and then by getting a light curve, we can, by analyzing it, we can get various information about the supernova from it. We can get the amount of nickel, the temperature of supernova, and also the gamma ray escape rate. And from the type 1a supernova, we can precisely calculate the value of Hubble constant. And the observation of from type 1a supernova light curve has been part of 2011 Nobel Prize. So these are the references for the talk. Thank you very much.